Hi, everybody. I think we'll get started. We know that there might have some people joining us in a couple minutes, but for the early birds, let's start it up. I'm Laura Glazer, and my publishing partner is Harold Fletcher. We are Some People Press. We're here from Portland, Oregon, and we publish autobiographies by incarcerated writers and art books. We also have a special author with us here today, and she'll be joining us up here after a short presentation that we'll give about Some People Press and the work that we do and where we do it. I also wanted to mention that we're really grateful for all the mothers and children who are here with us today on a special Mother's Day. Thank you. We know your time is really precious. We're also really grateful for Printed Matter and Gladys for setting us up here, and for all of you for coming to this special event. I'll hand it over to Harold.
Thanks, Laura. So, I did a project in Western Massachusetts about 12 years ago that was working with Amherst College at a House of Justice or county jail that was about creating debates in the jail context, and I was really excited by what happened there and the people I met. So when I went back to Portland, which is where I live, I started asking around if there was anybody doing similar work in prisons or jails in the Portland area, and it turned out that there was a prison that was only 10 miles or a 10-minute drive from my house that I had no idea was there. And there was somebody that was doing some art-related projects there. And so I started coming to that and met all of these amazing people that were a part of that, and then asked if I could create my own project at the prison. So the prison's called the Columbia River Correctional Institution, and it's a minimum security prison for men. It actually started out as a co-ed prison in the early 90s, but at some point they separated out the women, and it's just for men now. So there's about 300 people that are incarcerated there. Some of them are finishing up long prison sentences, and some are just doing very short prison sentences there. But everybody gets released within about 3 years at the most. This is what it looks like on the interior. It's kind of a nice prison as far as prisons go. So it doesn't, I'd been to some other places that definitely didn't have this architectural vibe to it, but it's, when you walk in, you're a little bit surprised. It's almost a little bit like walking into this place here or something like that. This is an overview of it. And instead of being in cells, people live in dorm kinds of settings. There's also a drug treatment program within the prison, and those people participating in that live in rooms with like 3 or 4 other people. So initially the project that I started was to create an artist residency inside of the prison. And so because everybody was already there against their will, but since they were there and they were getting room and board, I thought it would be interesting to sort of reframe what they were doing. A lot of the people I met already identified as artists, writers or musicians or people that did drawings or things like that. And so we just made it available for those people to recontextualize what they were doing in prison and think of it as like a year or 2 year long artist residency. And we got them name tags that they could wear at any time in the prison that said they were artists in residence. So it kind of gave them this different status. So this is one of the projects that was sort of done as part of that program, and taking photographs inside the prison with folks there and photographers on the outside responding to questions that the prisoners had. And then somebody that we met as part of that was interested in stand-up comedy, and because I didn't have any knowledge of how to help that person, we brought in local comedians initially to do little workshops, and then eventually other folks came. This is Fred Armisen, who came a couple of times to do workshops at the prison. And we had comedy shows that happened that the public could come to, and people would develop these 3-minute little sets. And within those 3 minutes, oftentimes they were referencing their own lives and crimes and various experiences they had. But they would also tell me about the larger stories of their lives. And so I was always trying to figure out, like, how could we fit more of these stories into what we're doing here? This was actually a book that was produced about all of the earlier work that was done there. It's called Conceptual Art in Prison. That was something too, as I was sort of teaching conceptual art as part of what we were doing there. So then COVID happened and we got blocked out of going into the prison for 2 years. And when we came back, I decided that I wanted to create this platform where the people I'd met there could tell their whole life story. And so we set it up just as like a writing workshop. So Laura and I go in every Friday for a couple of hours, and it's just like a normal writing workshop where people read what they've written, get feedback. But the idea is that they're all working towards making an autobiography. And so we have, well, no, actually we don't have any examples. Well, we have examples right here and at our table if anybody's interested. So we've published 5 of those so far, and they start with handwritten text, and then those get transcribed. We work with editors, and I do the bulk of the editing. And then eventually it gets to Laura, and she does the design work. And they're available for purchase, and we split the profits with the participants. And since then, we sort of branched out and do some other things that Laura will tell you about.
Can you advance? So I'll add a little bit of background. Harold and I had worked on books together previous to working on Some People Press, using print on demand for publishing those books. And one day he asked if I would be interested in working on this autobiography project. And in my head, I was thinking, I am way too busy in grad school to do a big project. So initially I thought no, and then I caught myself and I said yes. And it was one of the best decisions I've ever made, because going to the workshop every Friday for 2 hours and listening to the stories of folks who often feel like they don't have anyone to listen to their stories is one of the highlights of my week. It's really, the only requisite is to show up and pay attention. So I guess that's 2 prerequisites. We are often in the chapel, although sometimes we're in just a classroom. What happens is each of the writers spends the week writing by hand, and then during the workshop, they'll read what they've written during that week, and they'll get feedback from the other writers, visiting artists, Harold and I. One of the things we tell them very few things as an effort to make sure that folks get to write in their own voice, in their own way, but also not get too bogged down in details. So one of the things that we've recommended is they make a list of things that they want to make sure they hit in their autobiography. They also don't have to tell their entire life story in one book. Can you go back to TJ's? One of our first writers, Terry James, he took that list idea and turned it into a timeline, and that's how he was able to keep track of his life story and how he was telling it. And over the course of him being in the workshop for about 2 years, he was one of our first writers. We started in August 2022. He had a stack of papers that he would come in with each week that was about this tall. And this really kept him on track. So we include this in the book. So in a sense, you're getting an idea of where he started and how he kept track of his story. This is Aaron's notes about where he wanted to go with his life story. These are just a few shots. This is Miguel. This is one of a beloved member of our group, Freeze, who was a former break dancer. And we were not really sure why he was wearing those glasses that day. I'm really smitten with the process of watching their handwritten life story evolve and paying attention to the graphic qualities of their penmanship and how measured and careful each writer is. Christian was an incredible writer who is from California. We were really hoping someday to reconnect with him. Unfortunately, once a writer is released, unfortunately for their book, their life becomes very difficult, of course, difficult in a different way from being incarcerated. And they don't have time to work on their writing in the same scheduled way that they have on the inside. So We really encourage them to do as much writing while they're incarcerated, and then once they're released, have the opportunity to have their work edited, get the advance, and start marketing their work to their friends, family, and beyond. Chris Johansson was an early collaborator on the project. He's an artist and illustrated the covers of 3 of the books and did the illustrations for one of our non-prison books called Hi Friend. He also did a print of the cover to Hi Friend, which we sold at the fair last year, and we're again selling at G12 this year. It's a bit of a strategy, right? So we know that the writers we're working with don't have much of a network for selling their work. So we use our networks to bring in people who have an audience, like Chris Johansson, Constance DeBray, Miranda July, so that they participate in the workshop, read the work of these writers, and then help us get the word out. Miranda was one of our first visiting writers and read from all 4s, and it was really exciting to hear how the writers were responding to her work. Really special moment. Constance DeBray came in and did a workshop and reading on the inside, and then we met with her and some of the folks who had been released on the outside later that same day. We had pizza and sodas, and people read from their own books, and Constance gave them feedback. I'm really fond of Aaron's work. He is the author of How Long is 5 Minutes? He was one of our first attendees in the workshop, and he was extremely overwhelmed by how to start. So we sat together, and I showed him how I would take notes on what he was telling me, and that's how he began to form his outline of his life story. And when he was released, Harold and I met him at the halfway house he was staying at, and we did the final corrections on his manuscript. That's us at the computer doing that minutia work. We love to meet with writers who've been released at the library, and it's a great way to help them get a library card and just be in that place as a writer, and that it's so accessible. Often in the suburbs of Portland, there are great libraries. So this is Giuliano just after we finished editing his book, and the finished book is here. He wrote The Blacksmith. It was also incredible. We got to go to his home and meet his partner and his children a few days before the book was officially released. You know, we could really sense the meaning it had that their father had written the story of his life, and we kept hearing from everybody in his home. They didn't know so much of what was in the book. And they weren't like shocked necessarily, but they were really appreciative that the book gave them access to those stories they might never have heard. We met TJ in a Denny's, I think, after he'd been released. We show each author the review copy of their book so they have a chance to actually see it in a galley form, make edits. And after Constance did the workshop on the outside, we got this like great badass picture of our 3 authors, Joey, Aaron, and Terry James, with their published books that were available at that bookstore in Portland called Up Up Books. We were really lucky to receive a literary fellowship from Literary Arts, and as part of the celebration, we invited Giuliano to read to a room full of people who support literature in Portland, and that's him reading under the big sign. One of our visiting writers, Laura Moulton, also writes for Street Roots, which is a weekly paper sold by unhoused folks in Portland on the streets, and she wrote an entire article and interviewed Aaron about how he had grown up on the streets as a Portland street kid, and then had the photo and him with his book. we've also been really lucky to make friends with incredible supporters like Ross from camp, who arranged and designed and printed photos and documentation of the project and invited camp's supporters to come and see the work at a gallery in Portland, and it was up for quite a while. Made beautiful t-shirts that we could sell and that we can wear. We also have some at the booth. We're regularly posting on Substack, so we'll post things that are from forthcoming books that we know are in the editing pipeline, and excerpts from existing books as well. We, for the most part, our authors are coming to us in the workshop that we do every week. So we get to know them over a period of 1 to 3 years, and then we're developing their project, their book with them. Patty Prewitt came to us in a different way, a journalist who had written something about her and knew some professors who had worked with her throughout her incarceration in Missouri, contacted us just out of the blue via email and said that this writer was incarcerated, had been there in prison for 38 years, and had written an autobiography. Would we be interested in reading it? And Harold and I both read the first chapter within a couple days and immediately said yes. We never thought we'd actually get to meet Patty or really talk to her very easily. But within about a month of our first Zoom call, she was released. And we were talking on Zoom, we've been texting, and we met for the first time in person 2 days ago here at the fair. And we have published 3 of her books. She'll be reading from some. And we'd like to welcome you to the stage, Patty.
All right. Thank you so much. I am just happy to be anywhere in the free world. But California, we're from Missouri. This is so lush and beautiful. We love it, love it, love it. So I could talk on about stupid stuff all the time, but I will read to you. One thing I want to say, Harold and Laura are the most amazing people doing the most amazing work. And if you, as individuals, ever get a chance to do amazing work, maybe you're doing it all the time, hallelujah. But if you ever get a chance, don't say no. Do amazing work. I was just a regular mother, and when I came to prison, we didn't even know anybody that had ever been arrested. So when I came to prison, it was a bit of a shock, to say the least. Don't you hate brand new books? I like to work them a little bit. This is the first letter I wrote, May 6, 1986. Life with no parole for 50 years. That's what my paperwork reads. I saw it in print the day I arrived. Sentence, life with no parole for 50 years. Charge, capital murder. These pronouncements were boldly typed on the documents the deputy delivered when he handed me in. 50 years. I can't come home for 50 years. The year 2036. I'll be 86. Jane will be 66. Mama and Daddy will be dead. This is the first time I've ever started a letter with no idea who to send it to. I can't tell any of my loved ones the truth. The truth is, I'm not doing well. My family thinks I'm strong, but it's an illusion. Since the night Bill was murdered, my life has been so strange, and I can't even come up with a word to describe my state. Everything has been off kilter, off center, overwhelming, difficult, wrong, insane, frightening. I've been pinned in this dark prison for nearly a week. Seems much longer, and at the same time I feel like I just walked in. This is the first time I've been separated from my children for more than a weekend. Dear God, what are they going through? Are they going to survive this? Who will take care of them? I love my amazing sons and daughters more than anything. My children are my responsibility. What can I do to make sure they are cared for properly, loved enough? They've become orphans. Their good daddy is dead, and their mama is now as good as dead to them. God, what can I do? I keep picturing Jane and Sarah's frightened little faces peering out of the back porch window of my sister's home as I was driven away from them in the early morning hours of that horrible day. The little kids were asleep, I believe. I can't recall. It's all a blur of emotion, pain, fear, anguish. Why can't I remember? Even when events are too painful, it seems that I block them out or they become fuzzy. Over 25 years ago, I owned a pinto pony who escaped routinely to the neighbor. That memory is clear and crisp, but something as important as bidding my children a monumental farewell only a few days ago seems like it happened to someone else who merely told me about it. We were allowed to use the phone last night. After our group was herded into a tiny office, the guard warned us to make our calls brief, no more than 5 minutes. I hadn't heard my children's voices since I was taken from them. When it was my turn, each of my kids talked and sobbed, sometimes individually, sometimes all at once. But the officer didn't stop me. I guess because I had 5 young children, she cut me some slack. In fact, that I saw she and all the others were also crying when I was forced to break the connection. The kids are inconsolable. They wailed and bawled so hard they barely made sense. What can I do to help them? I can't bear their pain coupled with my own. Dear God, what can I do? Let me focus on my physical surroundings. My emotional world is too soggy. But first, let me think about how I got here. After I heard that my appeal was denied, my parents drove me to the Livingston County Jail so I could turn myself in, because my attorney misadvised us that I go to the prison there. Well, the Johnson County Sheriff's Department declared that they deserved the right to drive me to prison, so I was transferred to them that same day. The next morning, April 29th, it took 2 tries before I was satisfactorily secure in the police car. After I was in the car the first time, the local newspaper and other media people showed up and requested that the officers take me back into the jail so they could photograph my shackled, shameful, sorry, hobbled walk to the vehicle that was chosen to transport me back to prison. Happy to oblige, the deputies literally pulled me out of the patrol car and back into the door of the jail, only to turn me around to retrace my steps. For the cameras, guess take 2 worked for them. Silently, a grim deputy sheriff hauled me across the state to this razor-wired fortress of a prison. And once the necessary papers were exchanged, I was quickly taken to a big concrete block room full of steel bunk beds, Army barrack style. A female guard led me to a small, not-so-clean bathroom, much like an old gas station toilet, except for the addition of a rusty metal, green, moldy shower stall. I was ordered to strip naked, step in the cold shower long enough to get wet. She then poured delousing pesticide on my head and pubic area, and wait while the parasites that might have inadvertently entered the prison on my hairs were eradicated. I stood in the middle of the chilly room naked, dripping and shivering, while women piled in to use the restroom after lunch. Not knowing the greeting etiquette for such occasions, I smiled to each weakly in my shame and embarrassment. It didn't seem to bother them at all to use the toilet in the cramped room with the guard and me present. The poison burned my skin, And as I attempted to muster up the courage to complain to the officer, she thankfully gave me the go-ahead to jump back in the icy water. The blue jumpsuit issued to me is big enough for my brother, men's size 44. They have no uniforms in a 5. I wash out my panties, bra, and socks each night in the stained porcelain lavatory and hang them carefully on the steel bed rail. And each time I roll over in my fitful sleep, I flip my laundry, hoping to encourage the drying process. Each morning I put on the same damp underwear, which is now marked with rust stains. Mice, roaches, spiders, and mosquitoes also share this room, but they don't even bother me. I feel a kinship, I suppose, with these creatures of a lesser god. Unless the rodents and insects and I encountered in my free life, unlike the rodents and insects I encountered in my free life, these little beings have nothing to fear from me, nor I from them. From the vantage of my top bunk, I watch them going about their business and silently wish them well. Everyone in this room has a hard luck story. Some tales are pathetic. Some are incredibly sorrowful. Some are horrific. Some are not true. My story, none of these women want to hear about Susie Homemaker and how she ended up in this hellhole. Contrary to popular belief, prisoners do not claim innocence. In fact, they would scoff at such an idea. I'm so obviously a fish out of water that I just keep my mouth shut. I also know that if I mentioned that my plea bargain deals were offered by the prosecutors and turned down by me, they would cuss me out good, and rightfully so. These women are so street smart. They never believed in the justice system like I did. They always knew better. They were raised, for the most part, on the fringes of society. Law-abiding ladies like me who attended college, lived in neat 2-story houses in the country, and drove children to games and dance lessons are reviled, not revered. I did hear the rumor that I'm actually an undercover reporter doing a story on life in prison, if only it were true. Last night, we women of this room gathered on the concrete floor of the communal area and watched a made-for-TV movie about serial killer Ted Bundy. I realize that I'm now categorized with him. Oh my God, society now looks at me with the same revulsion and derision as evil murderers like Bundy. That sad fact settled on me like a thick wool blanket, and I feel heavy with the weight of the burden, suffocating, trapped. Time to turn my underwear over again and lay down. It's very late. My bunkmate below me seems to have no trouble sleeping, but I don't want to annoy her with rustling papers and squeaky bed springs. Writing this has helped me feel a little bit more like Patty, and a tiny bit less like that broken-hearted, sobbing, stupid, wrongly convicted prisoner who's sentenced to remain in here for the next 50 years. 50 years. 2036. I'll be 86. What is to become of me? What will become of my beautiful, precious children? I miss them so much that my heart aches with a pain like no other I've ever endured. That's from my first book. We recently spoke at a group that was talking about health for women over 50 in prison, which I'm shocked they had a group that did that. And they gave us these water bottles, but it feels so weird to be, it's like a kid's sippy cup to me. So, sorry though. The reason I have 2 books is because I was locked up too long for just one. That's pathetic, too. All right, this was written on October 13th, 2012. Dear Marcia, so you're curious about strip searches. Let me inform you. Let me provide you with the naked truth. Nakedness is a requirement, of course, thus the term strip. But removing every piece of clothing and brazenly standing a foot or two from the prying eyes of a guard is just step one of a strip search. Once you're in the buff, there's specific choreography that has changed over the years. But this is the current method. First, bend over, shake your hair and mess it up. No braids allowed, and heaven forbid you arranged your hair to try to look cute or simply presentable for your visitor. The first time I was ordered to do this, I tried to joke to the guard that my hair won't even hold a curl, so how can it hold contraband? But she was unmoved. Before you can progress from step to step, the officer must approve yes and okay are the most popular positive reactions. Now push the end of your nose up to expose your nostrils. Yes. Open your mouth really wide and wiggle your tongue and press it to the roof of your mouth while the officer peers in. Okay. If you wear dentures or partials, they have to come out. No adhesives allowed. I'll never forget the fear in Amy's face when she realized her top plate was firmly buried in her vending machine hamburger. Her visitor wore the same expression. Ears next, both inside and behind. Good things ears are rubbery. Now we are moving south. No one has ever asked me to lift my breasts, but if you actually have breasts, you must pick them up to show that no contraband is pinned on the underside. Raise your arms to show your armpits. If you have any other skin folds that might need to be repositioned for a better view, now is the time for show and tell. While still facing front, open your legs to display the inner thighs. When this move was implemented, I doggy lifted my leg way up and was chastised for revealing too much. No points for exuberance or flexibility. Now turn around, widen your stance, grab your butt cheeks and pull them apart. Drop into a low squat and cough, all at the same time. This pull, drop, and cough must be accomplished simultaneously 3 times. Sometimes more if the guard believes you are not giving any of these components the proper intensity. Their theory is that any wads of drugs you've stuffed up your purse will shoot out on the floor from the force of these motions. Don't know if that's ever happened, but at my age, I must do my best not to dribble. While still spreading your butt cheeks, fold way over, bottoms up, to reveal as much of down there as possible without turning this routine into a full cavity search. If you don't know what a cavity search is, just think about it. Cavity, search, speculum. You're in the home stretch. Lift your feet one at a time unless you're exceptionally talented to show the soles. Wiggle your toes, and you're done, if your dance is deemed successful. Every officer rates differently and can require a repeat. Some guards are really into it and seem to be checking every inch of me for melanoma. Others step back and hurry me along. One guard told me that she wanted at least 3 of the 12-inch floor tiles between my feet. I gave it my best shot, but then couldn't squat deep enough to suit her. I wanted to ask her who in this particular hellhole could do that, but I refrained. It's prudent to keep most of your questions and comments to yourself. This striptease comes before and after visits, upon arrival to and exit from the prison, and any other random time we are ordered to. After a short time of incarceration, we lose any shred of modesty. I could strip in the visiting room if that's what it took to see my loved ones. A guard once commented on how quickly I ran through the motions, so I remarked, "Yeah, I'm a professional stripper." Her eyes widened. "Really?" While she grilled me about moves, Velcro, G-strings, and costumes, I kept trying to interrupt. No, I'm kidding. Look at this body. Would anybody pay to see this? One more tip from personal experience. Strip humor is almost always lost on the stripping, searching officer. How many assholes have you seen today? Is not appreciated. Keep it to yourself. I've got one more. This is what Janie and I call the exit story. This is really especially exciting for us. December 21st, 2024. Yesterday began as a pretty normal prison day. I knew Janie was coming to visit, so I only got a short 30-minute workout at 8 o'clock when rec opened. The officers were late calling me to my visit after 10. When I got to the strip search room, I found out they were short-staffed as usual. The visiting room was nearly empty with only 3 visitors. Kylie was there with her husband and cute toddler Oliver, whom we all love to see. For only a few minutes, Janie and I discussed the fact that we didn't think the governor would grant clemency before Christmas. We then moved on to talk about family, Christmas plans. About 90 minutes later, a tall officer, unknown to me, in plain clothes except for this huge badge hanging from his neck, interrupted Janie and me. Patty, staff are not supposed to call us by our first names. So I sat still, not at all sure what was happening. Before I could ponder long, he turned to my daughter. Jane? She nodded. Follow me, please. We both froze. But then he added, you're not in trouble. I quipped, that's what they always say. We got up. What else could I do? Stage a mini sit-in in the middle of the prison visiting room? I knew we hadn't broken any rules. We didn't touch, share food or drink, or laugh too loudly, our usual transgressions. This stranger led us to a small room across the hall from the strip search room, where we found both Warden Mesmer and Deputy Warden Francis, both of whom I'd known for decades. The warden instructed us to sit. We did. The deputy warden, who could not stop grinning, pushed a button on his phone, and several voices introduced themselves as bigwigs in the Department of Corrections. One went on to say, we're working on your commutation paperwork. What? What does that mean? We've been working on commutation papers for the last 40 years. No one said that the governor had granted me clemency. I was stuck in what land? What's happening? Then the warden asked Janie, can you stick around? Quietly, with uncertainty in her quivering voice, Jane answered, I can spend the night if you need me to. What are we talking about? It still had not hit me that I was leaving the prison that day. Then the warden said, since you've been here a long time, I'll allow you to name 2 offenders to come over here to say goodbye. Goodbye? This is real. I'm going home. Jane asked, is my face red? Her face couldn't have been redder. I worried about her blood pressure. She also said her heart felt like it was a foot away from her chest. Janie was experiencing a huge visceral reaction to the fact that I was coming home with her that day. We were then escorted to a conference room. Janie and I kept touching each other to make sure this was real. Tessa and Dylan arrived. Tessa bawled when she understood I was leaving. Dylan, who was more stoic, sat quietly and took it all in. I noticed a big carved seal of the state of Missouri on a wall and asked the officer, is that seal made of wood? Yes, we make them at a prison. With a straight face, I asked, can I have it as a parting gift? Dylan and Tessa giggled. The officer did not. He had no idea how warped my sense of humor is. He was very sober throughout. In fact, he soberly explained where I could purchase one, as if. Janie worried that her husband would think the worst, since she knew from the location of her phone inside her vehicle that she was still in the prison long after visiting hours had ended. She noticed an old desk phone on the console and asked the warden for an outside line. The warden asked for the number and dialed John right after she told us we couldn't tell anyone about me coming home until the press release went out. We sat dumb thinking about what Janie could possibly tell John. When he answered, she said, this is Angela Mesmer, the warden, and your wife has something to tell you. Janie's a terrible liar. With a weak and wobbly voice, she said something about how the prison was letting her stay longer and how they were being so nice. I'm telling you, she sounded like a hostage. Dylan and I shook our heads. There's no way John was buying this, but what could he do? Eventually, a parole officer ran in with some forms for me to sign, and I asked my clothes. I don't have my clothes. My shoes, coat, and a T-shirt are in the strip search room. Someone retrieved them. To everyone's amazement, I stripped off my khaki uniform shirt and visiting room white tee before I pulled on my own navy blue tee. I flipped off the khaki-colored slides worn on visits, shoved my feet into my own shoes, donned an extremely old pink winter coat that had been grandfathered in 25 years ago, and stood up. I was on my way. When we got to the airlock, I balked. Inmates of high security like me are never allowed anywhere near the airlock. Someone shoved me through, and we landed at the front door of the prison. No inmate in the annals of history has ever left this prison on parole through the front gates. Another area is designated for both inmate entrances and exits to the prison, not the front door. We hugged the wardens, joined hands, and walked out to the parking lot. I was dressed like the inmate I'd been forever, walking across the parking lot, holding hands with my oldest child on the way to her truck. It was insane. The warden described it as unprecedented. No shit, Sherlock, unprecedented. We climbed into her tall four-wheel drive pickup and grinned at each other like we just escaped. I suggested we leave the prison grounds as soon as possible. But since it was extremely cold, Janie insisted on warming up the motor. Then Janie said that we had to call Brian, our attorney, who'd been with us since he was a law student. He was in Kosovo, but because of the magic of satellites, he answered. I had no idea where his voice was coming from. It seemed to me that Janie was talking to him through the windshield. So I did too. Jane told the windshield that I was in her truck. The windshield, with Brian's voice, said that he had heard nothing and cried from relief, joy, and the same craziness we were feeling. He stuttered, let me confirm. I cut him off and hollered to the windshield. Confirm what, Brian? I'm in the truck. I kept looking at the front door of the prison, expecting cops to spill out in hot pursuit, and again suggested that we leave the prison grounds. Janie pulled into gear, and just like that, we exited the premises. I mentioned that I need to use the restroom, but that we could leave town for that first. Janie informed me that there was nothing outside of this town. We were in the middle of nowhere. So we pulled into a gas station that she was familiar with and knew that the restrooms were clean. It turns out that gas stations have much more than just places to get gas. They are coffee and gift shops and more. The toilet was a surprise. It flushed without any assistance from me. I stood up, it flushed, and I said, I didn't do that. Janie assured me that automatic flushes are normal. Then I couldn't get any water out of the handleless faucet. Janie told me to wave my hand below the spout, so I did, and magically, water poured forth. Of course, I then ran into a recently retired prison officer, but she happily hugged me and sent me on my way. Once on the highway, we decided to call the kids by birth order. Sarah didn't answer. Carrie didn't answer. But Morgan picked up on the first ring. Janie asked, guess who I have in my truck? With no hesitation, Morgan answered, Mom. Janie and I looked at each other in shock. I hollered, how'd you know? Morgan then switched gears and angrily told us not to play tricks with some kind of three-way call. We both yelled to convince him. The first coherent words he spoke were, Mom, I have a car for you. I bought a car to flip. You can have it. That was such a man thing to say. He promised that he'd be right on his way from Lawrence, Kansas to Jane's. Then we called Sarah again. Once given the news, Sarah exclaimed, oh, I'm going to throw up. I'm going to pee my pants. I need to vacuum. She has 2 cats, and that was a very woman response. The last child was Carrie. She and her husband both squealed in delight. While we were talking to Sarah, she'd text Carrie 3 words: truck, mom, Jane. Carrie decided all made sense when we called. So Morgan and his girlfriend, Allison, hopped in his Bronco. Sarah grabbed some clothes for me, gathered her 2 grown kids who live locally, and drove over. Her daughter, who lives in Houston, raced to the airport and flew to KCI. Carrie and Tom drove up from Gulf Shores, Alabama, and their 2 grown kids drove straight here from Bloomington, Illinois. The whole family turned into homing pigeons. When the press release came out a couple of hours after we left the prison, we saw in real time what the phrase, "my phone blew up," means. The phone couldn't stop ringing. Words blazed like a firestorm, but traffic on the interstate crawled at less than 5 miles an hour. We decided to cut through the back roads while fending off calls that weren't family, except most were. We drove toward a spectacular sunset, excitedly relaying our miraculous escape story over and over. Nearly every house along our route was decorated with Christmas lights. Such a treat. Prisons are usually built away from civilization, so prisoners don't see Christmas lights. The realization that I was free to spend Christmas with my loved ones seeped into my broken heart. I hadn't spent a Christmas at home since 1985. Every vehicle that came from a side road worried me. For no reason at all, I pictured someone ramming into us, killing us before we could reach home. I've seen too many Final Destination movies. On a good day, the trip would take about 3.5 hours, but because of Christmas traffic, it took us nearly 5 hours. As we pulled into the driveway, the front door flew open, and Morgan, Sarah, and Abby ran out first. Morgan wrapped his arms around me and picked me up, and Jane hollered, "Don't squeeze her too hard, she has to pee." But Morgan ignored her just like he did when they were little. We all laughed, cried like children lost and found in a forest. That night was crazy. When I sat in a lounge chair, 22-year-old Abby crawled up on me, and we cuddled, just taking in the miracle that I was finally home. None of my grandchildren had ever seen me outside a prison visiting room. Jane's home became mayhem. Crowds came and went while yelling and eating. I hardly recall what all happened. Finally, everyone departed, and I dressed in the pajamas Sarah had brought and crawled into bed with Jane in their guest room. We didn't sleep. We would grow quiet, then say something inane like, "Can you believe it?" Toward morning, I thought Jane had drifted off until she reached over to feel my head to see if I was truly there. And I am here in the free world, surrounded by loved ones. I never gave up on my children, and my children never gave up on me. Thank you. You guys are great. Thank you so much. Yeah, anybody have any questions?
When did you decide you wanted to start? Oh, that was fantastic. Thank you. When did you decide you wanted to start writing? What kicked it off for you?
Prison is a secret. People don't know what happens in prison. And I realized I come from letter writers. I'm old. People don't write letters anymore. But I'm old and we wrote lots of letters. And my letters are pretty doggone good. And I thought, because I was always explaining what was happening, because all my people were just as in the dark as I was. And I thought, I need to start collecting these letters. And for the longest time, I didn't know if you could possibly ever get anything published to it, but I would have them for my kids and my grandkids of what happened. And then later on, I met a professor, and she looked at the letters, and she said, "Oh, I think these could make a book." And that moved on, and I met J. Malcolm Garcia, who's a writer in San Diego now, but he was in Kansas City for a long time. And he said, we need to do something with this, and so they found Some People Press. But the problem I had with the second book is when they let me out of prison, I didn't pack my stuff. The guards packed my stuff, and all these scraps of paper. If you're a writer, you know, you've got little poem ideas over here and scraps of paper and notebooks and stuff, and they don't look like anything. And they threw away a bunch of stuff. But I was very lucky that so many friends had kept my letters, that people were mailing me letters, and I could put them all back together. But I want everyone in the world to know that people in prison are just people. I was scared to death when I came to prison. But then all these nice people kind of took me in because they all were like, one girl called me Mary Ellen from Little House on the Prairie because I was such a rube and so stupid. I didn't know the lingo. I didn't know the etiquette for prison. It took me a while to get my sea legs, you know. But I think these letters, if you read them, I think you'll get a good insight of my journey. I have a young friend who came to prison at 18, young black girl, and we've acknowledged her journey is completely different than my journey, you know. So I can only write my journey, and I have stories about other people that I met in here. And this is Mother's Day. I spent like 2 hours this morning answering love from girls that I was in prison with who were out and doing good, and I mothered them in prison. And not to pat myself on the back, but I'm a better mother than their actual mothers were. So when you give love, you get love.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you for sharing your story. They kind of discussed the program that they run and help like with people writing. Was there any program that you participated in while you were incarcerated that you felt was really impactful or made a difference?
Yes, I was very lucky. Out of St. Louis, there's a prison performing arts, and they came in and we started doing Shakespeare. Yeah, it was amazing. And then as we were doing it, the lady who was the director, she realized we were writing too. So then we ended up with 2 classes, a spoken word, we called it, the writing class, and then the theater class. And then right after COVID was awful, killed everything in prison. I'm sure it was free worlds too. Washington University out of St. Louis, they have a program called Prison Education Project. They came into the prison, and I just earned my bachelor's degree in December, and I got to finish it with Washington University. But those programs came in and helped us write, brought in writers. It's very similar to what Harold and Laura are doing, just a different take. I think people that are in these businesses don't know other people are in these businesses, you know. But I hope every prison in every state has some group that comes in and helps people write.
We'd be really happy to continue conversations at booth G12. And for anybody who's interested in picking up one of Patty's books or any of our other titles, we're offering a fair special. Patty's books will be $15 instead of the $20. And I just want to mention all of the profits are split between us and the authors. So they go directly to helping them in their reentry. Thank you so much. Visit us.
Yeah. If anybody needs a hug, I'm here.